The Lumix S1 II is packed with features, but with so many modes, menus, and adjustments, it can be a little bit overwhelming and a bit of a mission to set up. To make your life even easier, I've included a downloadable settings file linked in the description down below. You can simply load my settings onto your camera and be ready to shoot within just minutes. A lot of these little tweaks and customizations only really come to mind after using this camera a lot on multiple shoots. This tutorial will walk you through all the key settings and customizations that make the S1 II more optimized and faster to shoot with, whether you're shooting photos or video. The S1 II shares a lot of its DNA with the S1R Mark II, the same body design and a very similar menu. After months of shooting with both these cameras on commercial sets, aerial shoots, and photo gigs across some incredible locations, I fine-tuned the settings and custom buttons that gets the most out of these cameras on real-world shoots. And if you like how this footage looks like, I've just released my cinematic all-red LUT pack. You'll find it down below. After you download my settings, pop it onto an SD card and put it into your camera, open settings, go to save restore camera settings, press on load, and choose the media card slot that you loaded the settings onto, and after that, you're ready to go. I've provided both PAL and NTSC version of the file, so anyone from around the world can use these settings. The S1 II has a separate photo, video, and SNQ dial, and this means that your C1 to C5 custom modes are completely separate. So instead of having 5 custom modes, you actually have 15. For example, in photography mode, I have set up my C1 to C5 custom mode to give me different aspect ratios. Switching to video gives you 5 fresh custom modes, and same applies to SNQ. We'll go over how to program them a little bit later. Now, what I think is the most important in terms of speeding up camera's usability are the custom buttons. Now on the S1 II and S1R II, we have the ability to separate the custom buttons for photo and video and SNQ. And this comes in really handy because we can reuse these custom buttons in different modes to serve for a different purpose. So in video mode, we have 3 record buttons. We have the shutter button, which can record video, as well as the top and front red record buttons. Now, I think it's a bit of a waste to have all 3 buttons recording video unless you're filming yourself and you need the front record button to record video. But I think there's way more tools that we can use and program them into those red record buttons. So the way we are going to program our buttons is going to the menu, go down to operations menu, and into the function button set. Going into this menu, we have settings in photo mode, video and SNQ, as well as playback. We're gonna jump into video and SNQ, and here we can change all the parameters of the custom buttons and set them up individually. First of all, we have the white balance button. That one is still set to white balance as that's a setting that we need to access very often. Next up, we have the ISO button, which is no longer ISO, and you might be wondering how we're going to control ISO. Well, actually, I've changed the back dial to control my ISO, which is super easy, and I recommend anyone do that. And this is why I changed the ISO button to serve a different purpose, because I never actually end up using it. I always use the back dial to change and adjust my ISO. So pressing on the ISO button pulls up our audio menu. And this is sort of similar to what we had on the GH7, where we had a specific dedicated audio button on top of the camera. This basically serves the same purpose, where we have a few settings that we can quickly adjust. Things like gain settings, seeing the levels nice and big, muting, monitoring, and also choosing which channel you want to monitor over your headphones. If you're doing a lot of audio recording on your camera, you'll definitely find that button very useful. Next up, the exposure compensation button. This one, ever since the GH4, ever since the GH5, I've always been changing this to enable my zebras. I never really use exposure compensation for video, so this button always becomes my zebras button. Now, my zebras are set to 80%, and this is specific for vlog. Anything that has zebras on it is going to be overexposed and clipped, so you wouldn't be able to recover it. So the ideal situation is having basically no zebras in your image. But sometimes it's unavoidable, for example, like this light bulb. This one has zebras in my shot, but it's totally fine. It's just a bright light source. My next custom button is the red record button on top, and the function of both red record buttons is serve as exposure tools. So my top red record button pulls up false color, which is the new feature on Lumix S1 and Lumix S1R, which shows you exposure levels you are getting with the sensor. The next couple of buttons stay exactly the same. So the viewfinder monitor button stays the same, so I can toggle between the monitor and the viewfinder, as well as the auto mode. The autofocus buttons also stay the same, as well as the quick menu button. And we'll go and dive into the quick menu very shortly. And lastly on this page, we have function button 1, which is the back button, and this one turns on peaking. So this is the same as I had it on my GH4, GH5. Always that button turns on peaking because it's something I use so often. Whenever I switch to manual focus on a lens, the peaking turns on, but if it covers too much of an image, I want a quick and easy way to turn peaking off. And this is also super helpful if you're using anamorphic lenses or any sort of manual lenses that do not have autofocus. It's just an easy and quick way to turn on peaking and get your focus sharp. Okay, on to page 2, function button 2, which is the one on the front right next to the lens. This one turns on E-stabilization. Once you press that, the entire menu pops up. So it gives you options to do cropless E-stabilization, which kind of corrects for the weird perspective shift on Lumix lenses. We have standard, which gives you a little bit of a crop, and high E-stabilization, which is really fantastic. Like, it works super smooth like a gimbal, as long as you're using kind of left and right, up and down motion without doing too much parallaxing. Otherwise it kind of counteracts and doesn't work as well. So I'd suggest turning this setting off if you're doing a lot of gimbal moves, if you're doing some parallax shots. But if you're doing like a following shot or walking left to right, definitely check out E-stabilization because it works really, really well. And if you are using Lumix first-party lenses, the cropless image stabilization is also a great option. It gives you no crop, but it still stabilizes the perspective shift of Lumix lenses. Unfortunately, this option doesn't work with Sigma lenses, which is also technically first-party lens, but it's just the Lumix lenses that support the cropless feature. Next, we have the other red record button, which is the one on the front, and this one turns on my waveforms. And waveforms are a fantastic way to judge your exposure. It basically takes the image from the left to the right. So whatever is on the left side of the image will show up towards the left side of the waveform. So you can really easily see where in the image you'll have highlights and something that's clipping or something that's too underexposed. I use waveforms all the time and you can resize it on the monitor. It's just fantastic. And I just want really quick access to them to turn them on, check my exposure and turn them off. Scrolling down, we have digital function buttons, which I never used. I way prefer physical keys. Function button number 8 is actually going to my list of recording qualities. And I've done a full list and I'll show you that very soon. But this custom setting, I actually got the idea from Josh Cameron. And I thought it's a super cool and clever idea. Just pressing the up button on the dial pad pulls up the entire menu with all your most used resolutions and frame rates. I think on the S1 II, because it's a video focused camera, this actually makes so much sense, especially if you're shooting 6K 25 and you want to switch to 6K 50 frames and you want to quickly switch to 100 frames. This just gives you the option to choose all your favorite recording formats and resolutions and have it accessible super, super quickly. Function button 9 is anamorphic desqueeze, and that's because I use anamorphic a lot. So this is basically a quick way to get in the menu and choose a desqueeze option. So if I put on a 1.5 anamorphic lens like the Blazer Remus, I can go to 1.5 squeeze, select that option, and I'm already desqueezing the lenses. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see it on the monitor because it's only affecting the inbuilt camera monitor. For an external monitor, anamorphic desqueeze, you'll have to have a monitor that actually supports anamorphic desqueezing. Function button number 10 is my frame marker. I use this quite a lot because if I shoot in 3x2 open gate, I want to see my final deliverable framing, which is, for example, 16:9. We can also go into the menu. Once we dive deep into the menus, I'll show you how to change this. And you can change it to 9:16 if you're delivering a vertical video. So you can just check your framing, making sure that everything in your image is correctly framed. Function button 11 is focus peaking sensitivity. And this comes especially handy if you're using manual lenses and let's say vintage lenses or anamorphic lenses, you need to see your focus peaking a lot more clearly. So in this case, I'm using a Lumix lens. It's a lot sharper. So for this lens specifically, I would probably turn down my focus peaking to around 0, sometimes even -2 if there's too much focus peaking on my display. But if the lens is softer, like an anamorphic lens or a vintage lens, I would turn this up to 2. So it's just easy to have it just underneath your thumb on the left dial button just to change it real quick. So that is everything for the video function buttons. Now let's go down into the dial setup and change one of these settings, which is the control dial assignment. By default, it is set to headphones volume, so you can adjust the headphones volume with your dial, but I found that setting the headphone volume to be constantly at one level just gives you a better idea of how your audio should sound like. So I usually just leave my headphones volume to around 10. So we can reprogram this dial to ISO, and now when I flick this ISO dial, it controls this up and down. I found that the ISO button is not that easy to bump accidentally, but if you do, then we do have the lock lever on top of the camera. So if you switch that on, the ISO button doesn't change anything, and we can also program what this lock does. So let's go into the menu, go into lock lever settings. So here you can see all the buttons that I have locked and unlocked. It's mostly the buttons that would cause the image to change the exposure. So the dials on top, the dial on the front, the ISO dial is now turned off. So you wouldn't be able to accidentally bump it and change your exposure during your shot. So you can see if I'm trying to change my shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, it's just saying it's locked. But if I'm trying to pull up my exposure tools like zebras, they're all active. My false color, my waveforms, they all show up. And I can also pull up my audio settings. So none of these are an issue. It just stops you from accidentally changing your exposure or going to a menu. So have a look at all these settings and you can now program your camera the same way I have programmed mine. Now let's move on to the quick menu settings, which is triggered with the quick menu button on the back of the camera. And if we go in here, we can go into customize for video and SNQ. So it's very cool. Again, the customizations inside of the quick menu can be separate for photos and separate for videos. And these are the menu items I don't use as often as my quick access buttons, but I still want them really easily accessible just in case I want to turn them on and off. So first of all, we have recording quality, which just lets you flick in between recording qualities really easy as well. Next, we have dynamic range boost. So if you want to enable dynamic range boost, you have like a static shot recording an interview with a bit of a window backlight, and you want to have a little bit more of that dynamic range, this is the place where I would turn that on. Next up, we have recording file format. So sometimes I might want to record something in ProRes. So I just quickly can switch into it and go back to my recording qualities, and I can flick through the recording qualities in here really quick and simple. The entire second line of the quick menu is all about stabilization. So I can turn on and off IBIS. I can also turn eStabilization on to cropless, standard and high. And I can also preview how that crop is going to affect my image. And lastly, we have Boost IS, which gives you the ability to make your handheld shot look more like a tripod shot. So if you turn on eStabilization to high, you turn Boost IS to on, and you try to get a handheld shot, it will really look very stable, especially on the wider lenses. So definitely try it out. But for now, I'm gonna flick both of those off. Next up, a quick way to turn on waveforms and vector scopes. Yes, waveforms is on my front button, but vector scope isn't there. So I have my vector scopes as a quick menu here, just in case I want to check skin tones. Next up is level gauge. This just allows you to line up your shots. If you're on a tripod and the tripod's not really straight, you can see that level line being aligned here. So if we go to green, there we go. That's perfect horizon. And moving on, we have photo grid line. So I usually use pattern number 1. That's just a basic rule of thirds. Sometimes it's handy when you're trying to line up your shot. And in the last row, I have slow and quick settings. So if I flick to SNQ mode and go into my quick menu, I can quickly adjust what kind of slow and quick option I would want. Do I want 60 frames, 1 frame, 2 frames? So it just gives me quick access to my SNQ settings if I'm filming some slow motion. But unfortunately, the S12 doesn't film SNQ in 100 or 120 frames. It only does 120 frames in real time. So it cannot be converted into a slow-mo clip in camera. So I use SNQ less than I did on the S1R Mark II, but it's still helpful and handy to have to convert a clip that's 4K 50 into a 25 frames per second clip in camera. Next, I have autofocus custom settings, so I can adjust my speed and sensitivity depending on how fast my shot is. And lastly, in the quick menu, I have my histogram, and this is mostly if I turn on the histogram in my photo mode. I don't have to switch back to photo mode to turn it off because I have it programmed to quick menu there as well. I can just turn it off straight from my video mode. So now that we've covered all the function buttons and the quick menus, let's dive deeper into the main menu. So diving into the main menu, first of all, we have photo styles, and Vlog is the picture profile that I would recommend most of you to shoot because this is where you're getting the Lumix S12. It's to get the best dynamic range, the most color. Vlog just allows you to grade this image and have a lot of flexibility in post. It doesn't matter if you're using Premiere Pro, DaVinci, you'll be able to move this footage around and get a really nice color out from it. Now there's so many other options in here as well. There's Cine Like V, Cine Like D, there's monochrome profile, files. If you're trying to get like a nice look straight out of camera without using Vlog, I would say natural is a pretty good way to go about it. And you can also do a few little adjustments. You can pull up the shadows and the highlights and add or subtract a little bit of contrast. So it just gives you a little bit of flexibility on top of the natural look. But I would say Vlog is probably the main one you want to use. We also have My Photo Styles, and there's a few here that you can customize. So you can select your base profile as well as adjust it further. So you can adjust highlights, shadows, saturation, sharpness, noise reduction. But the most interesting out of all of this is stacking LUTs. So we can stack 2 LUTs on top of each other. So let's say we choose Blocktra. And for the second LUT, we might choose Streetwise C. And you can see it is super overpowered and super strong. But the cool thing is we can adjust the opacity of both LUTs. So we can create a completely different and new look straight in a camera just with playing around with the LUTs that we have on here. If you want to access and download LUTs straight onto your camera, you can access the Lumix Lab app. So we're going to go back to Vlog and basically stick to Vlog for majority of the projects. If you have upgraded to the latest firmware version 1.1, there's actually one additional photo style, which is a paid upgrade. And that paid upgrade is ARRI Log C3. The ARRI Log C3 picture profile is really great if you're trying to use the S1 II or S1R II together with an ARRI Alexa camera. That way both cameras can have a very similar picture profile and it'll speed up your editing workflow. This is a very niche feature for only a specific number of users, but it's really awesome to see the partnership between Lumix and ARRI come together and bringing this ARRI Log to the small mirrorless cameras, which almost makes the Lumix S1 II feel like a ARRI Alexa Micro. If you want to find out more about ARRI Log C3, Dustin has done a fantastic video which is very in-depth. Check that out in the link below. Going down, the next setting is Dynamic Range Boost. This is great, as I said, for tripod shots. If you have some sort of backlight coming through the window and you want to just a little bit more dynamic range out of your shot, this is a great thing to have, but it will limit what kind of frame rates and resolutions you can shoot in. For example, anything that's like 5 or 6K, you wouldn't be able to get 50 frames out from that. You can only shoot in 30. ISO settings we'll leave at default. SynchroScan, now this is a very useful feature if you're filming in different venues and there's some sort of weird and cheap lights that they have and they flicker. So this is when you come into SynchroScan and you can adjust your shutter speed based on 1 degree increments, which is super useful. Recently I was shooting in a venue where the lights were flickering and I found that a shutter of 157 was actually where the flickering just completely stopped. So this might save all your shots if you're filming in tricky lighting situations. But for everyday use, we're gonna switch that to off. Shutter speed limiter, we're going to turn this to off, and what this does, as you can see, it limits the shutter speed so it does not become slower than the frame rate. So if we want to get some creative blurry shutter shots, this is the setting that we want to turn off. And by the way, if you want to see that little menu that shows you the background information and a little bit more info about each setting, just press the display button while in the menu. Going down, we have shutter speed and gain operation. Now we're going to set this to angle because angle allows us to move between different frame rates. So it doesn't matter if we're shooting in 50, 100 frames or 25. If we leave the shutter angle at 180 degrees, it will always look correctly, meaning we'll always have the right amount of motion blur. But if we use seconds, and we go out here, we need to make sure that if we, for example, now I switch to 50 frames per second, my shutter is still staying at 50 shutter. I need to increase that manually to 100. So if you're filming a lot of stuff really quickly, sometimes you might forget to change your shutter and your shot is not going to be that usable because it might have too much motion blur. So the way you do it, you set it to angle and it's always going to be double as long as it's set to 180 degrees. Now, the only time I would change this to actual shutter speed is if I want to get this crazy effect of slow shutter motion. You can see I can go down all the way to 25. And the trick with this is turn off autofocus, go to manual focus, and now we can actually slow it way down. So if I'm gonna turn down my aperture, you can see how slow this image actually is. But if I unlock the camera, you can see what kind of effect we are getting. We are getting this slow motion, very blurry effect, which is quite cool for some sort of projects. So this is the way you do it. You need to turn off autofocus and also flick into the seconds shutter speed menu. And also remember to turn off that shutter speed limiter. This is what this allows you to do and get that nice slow shutter look. So now I'm just gonna switch it back to angle and set it to 180 degrees. Now the next few settings we don't really need to worry about. Filter settings, I still wonder why this setting is still here. If you go to settings, this is what the filters are. This is very, I don't know, vintage looking. So we're definitely gonna turn this off and skip that setting for now. Okay, we are finally getting somewhere exciting, record file format. So we have MOV, which is basically what I would recommend you shoot majority of your projects. Apple ProRes is really great. It gives you a high quality codec, but it takes up a lot of space on your hard drives as well. So with Apple ProRes, use it if you really have a project that calls for it. MP4 is a little bit more limiting and has smaller file sizes. So if you want the best quality, but not too big of a file size, MOV is the way to go. And also MOV will provide you with the most variety of file sizes, resolutions, and frame rates. If you want to check out Apple ProRes, we can quickly switch into it, and there's 6 pages of different kind of frame rates, resolutions. We have ProRes RAW internally at 5.8K with 3.5 gigabits per second, which is a massive file size, and you can record it internally or to an external SSD drive as well. Shooting RAW internally on this camera will give you the ability to change things like white balance and post-production, but with Apple ProRes, you will need to be using Apple's Final Cut software to actually get the RAW file to be working properly. This file format wouldn't work in DaVinci Resolve, and it will not fully work in Premiere Pro, so you're kind of stuck with Final Cut. And if you are going to be shooting Apple ProRes, the ones I would recommend is going down to just normal Apple ProRes HQ 422 without shooting RAW. Even a lot of commercial shoots that are done with ARRI cameras are not even shot in RAW. A lot of them are shot in 422 HQ, which says a lot about this file format and how flexible it is in post-production. So we're going to switch back to MOV and going to record quality settings. We have up to 11 pages. It's a little bit overwhelming of how many settings there are. There's Full HD, there's 4K, Cinema 4K, then there's the new aspect ratio of like 2:1, which is like the cinematic one. There's OpenGate 6K, OpenGate 5.1K, and then there's the new OpenGate, which is 4:3, 50 and 25 frames per second. So many different options. And because it's a little bit overwhelming, I have put in the my lists of the most useful ones in here. And I have another version for NTSC where all the NTSC file formats are added to my list as well. So if you download my settings, this already will be set up for you. So what I think are the most useful ones is the 6K 25, 420, 10-bit, 3x2 and OpenGate. This is just the highest quality OpenGate image you can get out from this camera. Then we have 50 frames as well as 25 frames in 5.9K, and that's 16:9, just your standard video. And down here we have 5.1K 50, 5.1K 25. So these are both OpenGate modes. So if I'm going to be shooting anamorphic, I'm usually going to stick to 5.1K OpenGate. Going down, we have the 4.8K 50 and 4.8K 25. This is the 4:3 aspect ratio, which is new in this camera. This mode does crop on a sensor from the sides, but what it does is if you're shooting with 2x anamorphic, you would be cropping the sides anyway. So this sort of does it for you in camera. So that's a cool option. 4K 100 frames, of course, we've got to have the super slow-mo mode in here as well. Then we have 4K 50, 4K 25 and the lower bitrate options. And then we have the higher bitrate options, which is 400 megabits as well as 600 megabits for standard 4K. And as you know from the shortcut section, this entire menu is accessible just by pressing the up button, and it's just super and quick, easy access. Proxy recording setting. This is very helpful if you want to deliver small files, proxies of your main footage and deliver it straight to your customer. And you can also program LUTs on top of that. So if you don't want your customer to be looking at proxy files with a vlog flat picture profile, it looks just like mud and they wouldn't be able to apply LUTs themselves, you can put on LUTs onto your proxies. That way your original footage is in vlog, you can grade it in post, but your proxies that you give to the clients are graded with your LUT of choice. Next, slow and quick settings. If you switch to SNQ, this is the menu that allows you to adjust your speed and internally slow the clips down. And this is the exact same menu as in the quick menu on the bottom left. Timecode is very helpful if you're having an external recorder or an audio person on set and they want to access your timecode. This is where you do it. You can turn this to on. And the new setting on the S12 is the external timecode setting where you can sync your timecode device via Bluetooth with the Lumix S12. Moving on, we have HDMI raw data output. Now, yes, there is ProRes RAW available inside of this camera, but with this raw data output, you can actually record Blackmagic RAW with the Blackmagic external recorder. That way you can actually use the RAW files inside of DaVinci. Now, keep in mind with HDMI raw data output, you have few limitations. There is no noise reduction in camera and there's also no lens correction. So there's actually a few extra steps for you to do in post-processing. All right, we are now jumping into the focus settings. First of all, autofocus detection setting is on. Detecting subject, here is where we can choose what kind of subject we're filming: human, animal, car, motorcycle, bike, train, or airplane. Now the new thing with the S12 compared to the previous models is when we go into the detection mode, we have eye, face, body, eye and face, or the new urban sports mode. It's great to see that Lumix is improving and adding modes into this menu. Hopefully one day they can make an automatic mode where it can detect all of these subjects just automatically. But the cool thing is what you can do here, let's say you're filming a car, there's target parts as well. So you can film the main part of the body, or you can select to film the entire subject. So it just depends where you are situated, which way the car is coming, which places you want to film. This setting is very useful. This also applies to motorbike. You can film the helmet as the priority or the entire subject. And the same thing applies to train and airplane. It'll just focus on different parts of the body. Majority of the time I'm filming humans and also objects. So I just leave this to human tracking. Now for detection mode, I usually leave it to eye, face, and body. That way, if someone gets very far, the camera can still track its body, which is not really what happens with some of the Sony cameras like my FX6. It only tracks faces. So once you get maybe a couple of meters away on a wide angle lens, the subject detection stops tracking the face and sometimes might jump to the background. So having a body detection is very handy. Now the only time I would be using face and eye detection is if I'm doing like a close-up shot with an unboxing or something like that, and I have some objects in front of me. So if the camera starts tracking my body, sometimes it might shift to whatever's in foreground. So if you set it to face and eye for that scenario, that will work the best, and the focus won't drift to any other subjects. Autofocus custom settings, I usually leave these on and just change the settings in here. Usually I just leave it at 0 for speed and 0 for sensitivity. This just gives me a nice neutral autofocus tracking. If I'm doing some sort of a gimbal portion where I need autofocus to snap in faster on a tighter lens, I'd usually bump this up to around 3 or +4 and sensitivity to +2. But if you're doing something like a sitting down interview and you don't want the focus to shift, 0-0 works well. But if you do find you have some sort of autofocus pulsing, then just slow it down to -2 and you should be sweet. Focus limiter basically limits the amount of focus the lens can do. So we can set 2 limits. We can go all the way to the close focus, use the ISO and white balance button to set 2 parameters. So I'm going to use the ISO button, and let's say I'm going to focus on the monitor here and use the white balance button. Now, if we press set and we are in autofocus mode, even though there might be some subjects, or even if I set my focus point to the background, the lens will never autofocus to anything that's past the point that we have set in the menu. Autofocus assist light, this is just that bright orange light that turns on when it's slightly darker for the camera. So you just don't want that in your shot. So turn it off right away. Now in version 1.1 firmware update, we have the focus frame color setting option. This option simply allows you to customize your autofocus box. So this box that's movable right here, this one is the one that is going to change color. So now we change it to green, and we can also choose from a variety of other colors. Focus peaking, this one with manual lenses, anamorphic lenses, always stays on, and this is the same setting where you can change the intensity. So for anamorphic lenses, vintage lenses, you can use a higher intensity. For Lumix lenses, can be around 0. Display color, you can adjust which color you like for the focus peaking. I usually find that green works well, unless you're filming in a forest. Then you want to change it to something like red, a contrasting color. Display during autofocus, I leave on. So if I'm in autofocus mode and I half press the shutter, I can see that green focus peaking popping up just for a second there as long as I hold the shutter. I'd prefer to see focus peaking all the time, just like on my FX6, and just turn it on and off with a button, even during autofocus. But unfortunately, Lumix doesn't have that feature, but it does stay on if you half press the shutter. Focus frame moving speed is set to fast. That just represents how fast this focus box is moving. Sound record level display. I always have that to on so I can see my levels, but I set the size to small. Otherwise, if you set it to large, you won't see it here, but on the actual monitor of the camera, it just takes way too much space. So setting it to small, you can still see all the levels and details, but it just doesn't take too much space, doesn't block your view of the shot. Going down, sound record level is set to standard. My sound recording level adjustments is usually between -8 and -12 for the microphones I'm using, which is the Holyland Lark Max, the Holyland Lark M1, as well as some of the Rode Shotgun microphones. Next is sound recording quality. So if we're gonna put in one of these external XLR adapters, which you can plug in microphones into here, this will enable the setting. So we have options to select 48 or 96 kilohertz and 24-bit. And there's also two grayed out options because this is the version 1 of the XLR adapter. But if you were to use the version 2, the latest one, this will give you 32-bit float audio. So it's basically raw audio. It allows you to get all the highs and the lows and adjust it in post. So even if you mess up some of the audio settings and you're a beginner to audio, this will basically save your audio. So it's a great feature to have. So if you're struggling with audio or you don't want to worry about it too much on a run and gun shoot, definitely get the version 2 of the XLR adapter, and then you'll get really fantastic audio quality with the 32-bit audio feature. The next settings are set to standard. Mic socket is set to mic with plug-in power. That way, if I have like a little shotgun microphone on top of my camera and it doesn't have its own battery built into it, the camera will supply that little microphone power. But if it does have battery, or you're using like a wireless microphone, which the receiver has battery in it, you can set this to line. But I just find set it to microphone with plug-in power, and it just gives it power if it needs to, and it doesn't if it doesn't. Next up, 4-channel audio recording. This is where your XLR adapter is going to help you out if you want more audio channels. So if we set the camera to XLR plus camera, you'll be getting 2 audio channels from the XLR adapter. So you can have 2 microphones on here. And also you're getting the 3.5mm jack to work as 2-channel audio because it's a left and right channel. So you can plug in a wireless microphone with 2 receivers and have one microphone go to the left channel and the other one go to the right channel. Sound output, real-time, and recorded sound. So recorded sound will give you a more accurate representation of what's actually being recorded onto your camera. The issue with that is it does have a little delay. So if you're trying to speak to whoever you're speaking to and you have headphones on listening to the audio, you'll hear a delayed audio of your own voice, and it's super confusing, and just you wouldn't be able to talk if you have this on and you have headphones on. So I sometimes have to set it to real-time if I'm trying to communicate and direct while filming. Headphones volume, I always keep this to 10, and that's why I have moved that headphone volume from the back dial and I just replaced that with an ISO because I don't really change this setting, and I prefer to have this set to a constant level. That way I know if something is too quiet, there's something wrong. So I just leave this to 10. I got used to it, and it just makes a lot more sense to keep it constant. Next up, sound monitoring channel. So this is just what your headphones will hear. You're going to be hearing channel 1 and 2 from your camera, channel 3 and 4 from the XLR adapter, a mix of all of them, or you can just pick individual channels, which ones you want to listen to through your headphones. So if you have a boom mic plugged into the camera, but you also have 2 lavaliers and you want to just listen to one of the lavaliers, you can do that from this setting. Silent mode I sometimes use when doing photography. If you're taking photos in silent mode, it just uses electronic shutter. It doesn't use mechanical shutter, so your camera is completely silent. For video, it doesn't really make much difference as long as you have turned off the beep sounds in the settings that we'll go down to a bit later. Now, hybrid zoom for video and crop zoom for video, they're very similar features. Now, the reason they're grayed out is because we're in the highest resolution settings. So if we go out of this menu and we go and drop it down to 4K, let's say 4K 25 frames per second, 422. Once we drop down to 4K, we can go back and turn on hybrid zoom. What's going to happen is the lens is slowly going to be zooming in digitally as we turn the zoom dial on the lens itself. So this is the 24 to 60 lens, but as we zoom in, you can see it zooms in all the way to 93mm. And because this sensor is a 6K sensor, we can still get a full 4K image out of this lens with digital crop. So this 24 to 60 lens actually becomes a 24 to 93mm, which is super impressive. You're still getting 4K. So this is super impressive, especially that it zooms together with the physical zoom ring. This is a great feature to convert your small f2.8 lens from 24 to 60 to 24 to 93. So if we turn off hybrid zoom, go into crop zoom, turn that on, this will give us the millimeters and we can adjust it manually. So if I zoom in all the way, this is still at 60, but if I press the up button on the dial, this will give me the digital crop that we were doing before automatically together with the zoom dial. So you'd mostly use this feature if you're using a prime lens or a manual lens. Going down, we have image stabilization, which I think is one of the most exciting things about Lumix cameras is how well they stabilize lenses lenses, and not only spherical lenses, they also stabilize anamorphic, which is pretty much the only company that does that out on the market. We also have electronic image stabilization with many different options, as well as Boost IS. Down here, we have electronic image stabilization for video, which has a few different modes. Cropless mode works with Lumix lenses only. It doesn't work with other L-mount first-party lenses like Sigma. So for example, it works really well with the 24-60 lens from Lumix. And as you can see, it corrects distortions at the edge without cropping the image. So it's great for walking shots. Next, there's standard E-stabilization, which works with any lenses, but it does apply a little bit of a crop. And if we go into high E-stabilization, that gives you a lot more of a crop, but it gives you super stable footage, as long as you're not doing some crazy parallax shots, because if you're doing and filming a subject around, then this E-stabilization will not have enough movement to catch up. But if you're doing walking in shots, left and right, and sort of more simple movements, E-stabilization will work really well. Now, Boost IS you can apply on top of E-stabilization, and this is more like a fake tripod shot. So you can hold the camera with one hand, turn on Boost IS, E-stabilization, and it will make your camera look like a tripod. Try it out, but don't try to make any movements with it, because then the image is trying to catch up, trying to make it look like a tripod, but you're walking. So it wouldn't really work, but I found that this setting, together with E-stabilization, works pretty well on like a moving boat or a moving car, where you're trying to just keep one frame, but the car is moving. Last but not least, anamorphic image stabilization. So Lumix is fantastic for shooting with anamorphic lenses because it has de-squeeze options and is the only one that has anamorphic image stabilization. If you're shooting on a Sony, Nikon, Blackmagic, all the other cameras out there, you have to turn off your image stabilization. And if you want to have stable footage, you have to use something like a gimbal, tripod, or EasyRig. Otherwise, you'll get those micro jitters. And normal image stabilization would never work with anamorphic lenses because of the squeeze factor. It's just a different way that the image is squeezed and has to be de-squeezed in post. So Lumix came up with some sort of a formula where it applies different sort of stabilization to vertical pixels and different stabilization to the horizontal pixels based on your D-squeeze. So if I set my stabilization to 1.5 D-squeeze and we put on an anamorphic lens on this camera, this will give me a really good result. So when I put the anamorphic Blaser Remus lens on here, this will give me the option to set the lens information. And this is really, really important for manual lenses. If we go into this menu, you'll see I have many different lens presets, and you can add up to 12. So this lens is 125 millimeters. So I'm going to find my preset for 135 and press OK. Now this lets the IBIS know that I am going to be filming on a 135mm, so it's going to do a different calculation for IBIS to work correctly. The main tricky thing when filming with anamorphic lenses and IBIS on Lumix camera is you actually have to change the IBIS modes every single time you change your lens. So if I were to switch to 33mm right now, I need to remember to change this focal length here in the menu as well. I usually turn off the camera when I'm changing lenses, that way the camera shuts the shutter, there's nothing that can go onto the sensor. Good thing about turning on and off the camera when switching lenses is that the camera will pop up with a little reminder and ask you if you have switched your lenses and if you want to update the focal length. And if you have a specific lens that you want to input into here, you can go to a new lens or change one of the existing ones, press on a lens, and add your own focal length. So you can change it to whatever focal length you might have. It doesn't really matter. You can go down by 1mm increments, which is really cool, and put a lens name if you want, and just save that, and you'll have a new lens programmed into the IBIS. I'll definitely suggest you input all the anamorphic and all the manual lenses into this menu so you can quickly pull them up. So let's say I have a 33mm Blaser lens, I can quickly click on it and it's ready to go. Self-timer, you can do a self-timer. If you're filming yourself, you can turn it on for video. We'll give you 10 or 2 seconds before it starts rolling. Focus transition might be handy if you want to do focus pulls at the same speed every single time. So if we go into this menu, we use the white balance, ISO, and exposure compensation button to set 3 different points. We can set 2 points, up to you. So I can set 1 point is the lens is completely out of focus. So that will be set to my point number 3. Point number 2, I want it to focus right on me on the screen. So that's the 1. We press the ISO button to lock that in. And you can see another point is added onto the focus timeline. And if we go to the background, I'm going to focus on that little magazine thing and press the white balance button. That sets another mode. So then we press the set menu and we have the 3 points, number 1, number 2, and number 3. So if I want to go from number 1, which is set to the background, to completely out of focus, I'll press on number 3. and it just does a focus shift for me. And every single time it's going to be the same speed, which could be really handy for some shots that you want to repeat the focus on. And if you press on the display setting, this will give you the speed settings. We can go to transition speed, go to low, and if we press on number 2, you can see it's taking its time now to transition the focus from the background to the monitor. And again, if we set it to super high, and now we transition from number 2 to number 1, that's how fast it is. It's super fast and snappy. So this could be quite an interesting little trick if you want to do same focus pulls every single time. Loop recording video will just delete your older clips and keep writing new clips. So just be careful with that setting. I'll leave it to off. Segmented file recording, you can just make each individual file last a minute, 3, 5, or 10. This might be useful if you're trying to roll something super important, and just make sure you have the first 10 minutes separately in a file to the second 10 minutes, or let's say your computer can't handle such massive long files. Then this could be the setting you want to turn on. Live cropping is quite an interesting setting where it allows you to add movement to your tripod locked shot, which is quite interesting because you can do this in post, but this feature allows you to do it in camera. So if we go to set and select the duration, let's say I want to spend maybe 8 seconds on this movement. Easing setting, let's say ease in and out, so it's smooth at the beginning and the end of the movement. And we go to cropping start and end frame. So let's say I want to start in the top left side of the frame, select the start position, and I want to move the shot to kind of like more center out that monitor. Now if I press the back button or the bin button, this will give me a preview of what this shot is going to look like. And I mean, it's pretty cool for in-camera movement, and the camera's just staying in one place and it's locked off. And I would say the ease in and ease out effect is pretty nice. It's pretty smooth. I'm not too sure why you would use this effect in camera, but I mean, it's cool that Panasonic has added it and kept it. So just add it onto the list of features that Panasonic does have, and I don't think any other camera has this one. So that feature is a little bit of fun. Okay, now we are ready to drop down to the image quality settings. So here, photo style settings, this is where we can show and hide photo styles. So if there's some photo styles you never use, you can just hide it. Then it makes flicking through the photo styles a lot easier. Now, one cool thing about this menu is you remember I showed you my photo styles, and there were only 4 available in that menu. But here we can actually turn off up to 10 of my photo styles. So you can create a lot more photo styles and have way more flexibility and customization with this. So you just go into one of these, turn it on, and now you have 5, 6, and we can actually turn on all 10 of photo styles, so you can customize this camera so much more. Next up, we have the LUT library, and this is where you add all your customized LUTs. We have the Vlog Rec 709 conversion, which makes your flat Vlog picture profile not look like mud. It just gives it a little bit of contrast, makes it standardized. We also have some sample LUTs that Lumix has included. And if we keep going down, there's lots and lots of slots onto putting your own LUTs into. There's up to 39 slots, which is a lot, and it's really great to see. Most of the time, I'm using my own LUTs, which are the All Red Komorebi and Tokyo Fade. So if you like the look, check out the description below. And if you want to load LUTs onto your camera, you just need a cube file on your SD card. Press set, load, select the card, and select your LUT, let's say Tokyo Fade. Once you load the LUT, it will transfer into the internal memory of the camera. So now you can take the SD card out and all your LUTs are still on the camera. Moving down, we have ISO increments. We're just gonna keep it at default, 1/4 of a stop. Extended ISO, we're gonna keep it on. And we're just gonna scroll down onto the next page into exposure control in P, A, S, and M. So this menu is a bit new with the S1.2 and S1R2, and it basically means you can digitally choose which exposure mode you wanna be in, instead of using the physical dial on the top. So let's say we go into video mode and change this to be in program mode. So it doesn't matter what the dial is set to on top here, it's always going to be in program automatic mode. So we're just gonna leave both of these to mode dial. I think that makes the most sense. Next is a very important setting, photo video separate settings. Now this setting gives you the ability to have a completely different set of settings in photo mode and in video mode. So the only thing that I've set to the same is my white balance. So if I have a white balance of 55,000 in my video mode, and then I quickly want to switch to photo mode and take a few photos, the white balance from last night at 32,000 Kelvin is not going to suddenly turn on and I have to fumble with my settings. Everything's going to be the same in terms of white balance. So if I quickly want to switch and take a photo, I'll be set with 55,000 Kelvin or whichever white balance I was using in my video mode. The settings that I have set up to be separate is aperture, shutter speed, ISO, so all my exposure settings. My photo style is going to be separate, so I can shoot in Vlog, then quickly switch to photo mode, and I'll have my LUTs already ready to go. Metering mode and also autofocus mode is also separate. The only time I'll change the white balance to separate is when I'm shooting with specific LUTs, which give me a more of a warm color tone, and I just want to keep the white balance a little bit different there. The next setting that I have turned on is autofocus and manual focus at the same time. So if I'm in autofocus mode, I can still readjust the focus with the manual ring. If this setting was to be turned off, the focus ring does nothing when you're in autofocus mode. Okay, manual focus assist. There's one setting that you probably should turn off. It gets really annoying for me, and it's turned on by default. So anytime you're in manual focus mode and you just barely touch that focus ring, it's just gonna pop into like a super tight shot. It might be good for photography, but for video, it's pretty distracting, I would say. So I always just turn that setting off, and just my back focus button here just zooms into the image. So I can do that manually and it's fine, but when it does it every time you touch the focus ring, it's just super annoying. So I would turn that setting off for sure. The press joystick is also nice to have on. You can just press the joystick in and that will also zoom into your image. And for manual focus assist display, I always do it full instead of picture in picture. That way it gives me a full-on preview of my close focus. Going down, show hide autofocus modes. If you don't use some of them, you can hide them in here. Next important setting I would say is human eye detection display. That way you can see that the autofocus is focusing on the eye. Half press shutter, if you want to record video with half pressing the shutter instead of fully pressing it. Assign record to shutter button, that just means that the shutter button will record video. Now we're just going to keep moving down. Past quick menu, we already preset that. Function buttons, lock lever, the dial setup, we've done all that. We preset all of those settings, and going down to constant preview. Constant preview is more of a photography setting, so when you're taking photos, making sure that your display is actually showing you the accurate representation of what the exposure will be. So just make sure this setting is turned on. Going down, we have histogram. This is something I use mostly with photography. We have photo grid lines where we can choose the same thing as in our quick menu. The night mode option turns your viewfinder as well as your monitor to a dark red color, so it's just easier on the eyes if you're shooting stars at night. The shear overlay setting is quite an interesting one. Once we turn it on, we can choose an image from the images that we already captured. So if you're doing a transition and want to do a frame match and position a person in a similar position, for example, you can do shear overlay, and this will basically overlay one of the shots that you previously captured. You can actually take a screenshot in camera of one of the videos you took and then overlay that onto your current clip. So this way you can just line things up in camera and making the transition look so much better. It's quite a small and niche feature, but when you need to do transitions, this comes in real clutch. Going down, we have level gauge, so we can enable that to get that horizon locked off. Going down, we have framing outline. I always leave this on, especially when I'm doing night shoots, and that's because it gives you a little border around the monitor. So if you're looking at your image at night, the bezels of your monitor will sometimes blend in with the actual darkness of the image. So this just gives you a clear indication of where the edge of the frame is. So if I turn this off, you'll see that there's no edge that's guiding you on where the image starts and ends. If I turn this on, it's just a lot more clear to where your recording image is. Moving on, we have log view assist, and this is where you select the LUT you want to use as a preview LUT for your log. So in my case, I have my all red LUT selected, and you can change if you want the monitor on the camera to have the LUT applied, as well as the HDMI display. Sometimes you might want to have LUTs triggered via your external monitor. That way you can turn off HDMI LUT view, and this will give you a flat picture profile coming out through the HDMI signal, and that way you can apply LUTs through your external monitor. HLG View Assist is the same concept, it just works with the HLG formats. Moving on, we have the anamorphic desqueeze display, which is exactly the same as the right function button on the dial pad. It just allows you to desqueeze different anamorphic aspect ratios. Monochrome live view, it just gives you a preview of your image in black and white. It's really good if you want to get more detailed focus peaking, that you can actually see the green color coming out, but this wouldn't affect your final image. So your final image is still recorded in color. Center marker, I usually leave the smallest center marker on my image. That way I can still see where that perfect center is if I'm doing some product placement. Safety zone markers I don't really use, but frame markers are super useful. Now finally, with the version 1.1 firmware, we have received an update with multiple frame markers. This menu really depends from project to project and what your final deliverables are, but let's say we're shooting in 3x2 OpenGate, we want to see what the final 16:9 framing composition will be like. So let's set the frame aspect ratio to 16:9. You can assign any color you like, and you can change the position of that on the screen as well. Now let's move out to frame number 2. So usually it is going to be a 9:16 framing. It just really depends from your project. You can also change the color to whatever you like. Let's make this one yellow. And you can also adjust the size and position from here by using some of the dials as well as the joystick, or you can just use your finger and drag it on the touchscreen. Now let's turn on frame marker 3. Let's make this a 1:1 composition. Now last but not least, let's change the live view frame marker to on. Now what this allows you to do is simply tap on one of your frame markers. You can move them around to wherever suits for your composition, as well as scale. We can get out of that menu by half pressing the shutter. Press on another one, we can reframe each individual frame marker to suit your composition the best. Let me show you why Lumix frame marker feature is very useful. Now let's say this is my main shot and how I want it to be framed. I want the monitor to be on the left thirds, but at the same time, I want to check if this framing is going to actually work for a 9:16 deliverable as well. So we're going to go into the menu. Now let's turn on my second frame marker because I want a 9:16 vertical deliverable as well. So in this case, because I have framed by 16:9 shot with the monitor on the left thirds, I want to really make sure that this monitor will fit in my final frame. So I'm going to tap on the vertical frame marker and move it to the left side. Now you can see we're shooting in OpenGate and this monitor is still not perfectly fitting into my 9:16 frame. So there's a few options. We can zoom the shot out. We can pull the camera back. You can move the monitor around a little bit further away from camera. There's many options, but this frame marker just allows you to see your framing a lot better. And you can check if your 9:16 and 16:9 will fit all your subjects perfectly in frame. Zebra patterns, I am set to zebra 1 and the zebra is set to 80%. So this is showing me the highlights and what is clipping on my image. And this is specifically for vlog picture profile. Going down, we have false color and waveforms. As you can see, they're like super deep in the menu, so it just makes so much sense to put them on the red record buttons, one on top of the camera and one in the front. Otherwise, you would really have to like dig in through these menus to find these little features. So it just makes so much sense to just press a button and false color just pops up. Red record frame indicator and the blue one for live streaming. It's just nice to have a very nice indication when you're recording a video clip. It just shows you a nice big red border and you cannot go wrong that you're recording a clip. So super handy, always leave this on. HDMI recorder output, if you're trying to record a clean signal via HDMI to your external recorder, this is where you can switch off the info display. If I switch this off, you can see there's nothing showing up on your feed. If I switch it on, now it's back on with all the settings. So when I am on set and I have a focus puller, I usually turn off the info settings so you can have a clean feed and get a nice focus while I have the menu showing up on my camera monitor. The down convert function is also sometimes handy. Some monitors cannot handle a 4K signal, so switching it from auto to 1080p will usually fix a lot of the HDMI monitor issues. Sound output via HDMI. If this setting is turned on, and you're doing manual focus with an external monitor, this setting will give you a lot of lag. So I recommend for everyone just turn off sound via HDMI and have a faster signal with the HDMI feed. This is one big issue that I think Lumix should fix. They definitely improved it on the S1 II and S1R II. It's definitely better than the S5 cameras, but it's still not fully fixed. And if you want to record 100 frames per second externally, this is where you get the 100 frames per second output via HDMI. Fan mode, I set to auto 1 and I never had an issue with that. And tally lamps, I have them all to on, so if I'm filming myself, I can see I'm filming. If I'm filming a talent, they know I'm filming, so it just gives everyone a nice confidence boost that the camera is rolling and ready to go. Lens focus resume is on, so with all the focus by wire lenses, they don't really have hard stops. So if I turn off my camera and turn it back on, the focus point will be at exactly the same point. Lens function button settings. Some lenses like this one has a function button which you can set to do many different things. You can focus stop, and there's plenty of things that you can program that to do. You can turn on peaking, you can do a bunch of things, image stabilization. I just never really bothered with it because a lot of my lenses don't have a function button, so I just have it set to default focus stop. Now, focus ring setting during autofocus is a really interesting setting, and this is something new that they just added to the latest Lumix cameras. So whenever you're in autofocus mode, you can use the focus ring to control other settings. Now, for this setting to work, what we need to do is go back to the autofocus settings in here and turn the autofocus plus manual focus option to off. Now, if we go back down and have the focus ring setting during autofocus set to, for example, color temperature, we can use the focus ring to adjust our Kelvin number, which if you're filming events and going from indoor to outdoor, back to indoor, this is such a useful feature because it's just at the flick of your hand and it's super easy to access, makes it a lot faster to change than pressing the button and adjusting it that way. But this also applies to other settings. You have photo styles, autofocus modes, white balance, sensitivity for ISO, exposure, crop zoom. So you can even adjust crop zoom to actually have a zoom lens, but it's a prime lens. That's pretty sick. If I set it to ISO sensitivity, this is just super cool. I think Canon has been doing something similar where you can use the lens ring to adjust white balance. And not only that, you can also change the direction of the ring. So which way does it go up and down? Now the next setting gives you some control in manual focus. So this applies to all the electronic lenses, the focus by wire lenses. When you're changing the focus in linear mode, it gives you a similar vibe as a manual lens would. But non-linear control responds faster with faster turns, and it really slows down when you're turning it slow. So your focus points wouldn't be really in the same angle position of the focus ring every single time. It will depend on your speed. So if you're trying to put a wireless follow focus and set your in and out points, based on your speed of rotation, those points will change. So if you're using something like a wireless follow focus, definitely choose linear. And if you want to further customize the linear amount of degree rotation that it takes the lens to go from infinity to close focus, you can set how many degrees it takes. You can set it to 90 degrees, which is very fast, very responsive, or you can set it to 1080 or even maximum. So if I go and set it to 90, and adjust my focus, you can see that just a little movement of that focus ring takes me from infinity to close focus. But if I change this to, let's say, 1080, this lens becomes like super accurate, but it takes you so many turns to actually go from infinity to close focus. So that's another little addition that Lumix has added to make these customizations with lenses a lot more in depth. And one more thing they just added with the Lumix S1 II is the ability to change the rotation direction. So some of you might want to get those manual focus pulling kits, and what you might notice is when you attach that to the lens, when you think of pulling focus towards you, it actually goes further, and when you pull the focus away from you, is going towards you. So this would allow you to flick the way that the lens works, and that way if you're actually using one of those manual follow focus kits, if you're pulling the focus towards you, it actually is going to bring the focus towards you. So this is a handy little feature that might be useful to some of you out there. Next up, we have vertical position information for video. So this is when you're filming videos vertically, like actually switching the camera onto its side. And that way the actual footage that's recorded onto your memory card is going to have that metadata that footage should be rotated. So when you import the footage into Premiere Pro or your editing software of choice, all that footage is going to appear vertically. You don't have to rotate it in post. There's only two scenarios where you might want to look into turning this feature off. One is if you're filming a top-down shot. Sometimes the camera might not be sure which orientation it is in. So you might be filming a horizontal top-down shot, but it actually is going to do a vertical top-down shot just because of that top-down position. And the second scenario is if you're filming with anamorphic lenses. Sometimes you might start rolling if the camera is in a sideways position, and then the video clip you get is actually with the metadata of a vertical video clip rather than horizontal. And this will mess up your desqueeze in post, where you'll have to manually rotate it and desqueeze it again. So if you're filming anamorphic, I would turn the vertical positioning setting off. Okay guys, we're getting there. So we're going to the next big menu, which is the card and file menu. Card format, super self-explanatory. You can format your cards over here. Double card slot function, super handy. Most of the time, I do record as a backup recording. So I record to the CF Express card as well as the SD card at the same time. Most of the file recording formats that I use actually can be recorded to both at the same time. If you're recording ProRes or some of the high bitrate resolutions, you will only be able to record to one of the cards and then you can do proxies to the other. Another option here is relay record, where it fills up one card, then it moves on to the second card, or you can do photos to one card and videos to the other. Okay, here we have USB SSD. This is where you can plug in an SSD drive to the USB-C port and use that as your recording device. And when you're using an SSD, it makes it super easy to copy files. You basically unplug the drive from the camera, plug it into your computer, and you can start editing. Now, there's also one more function with this USB SSD, and that is copying your footage, existing footage, from the SD card or CF Express card straight onto an SSD drive. So for that to work, you also need to turn on the USB SSD setting, then go into your playback options, select the transfer feature, and then you can actually transfer your files from the camera straight to an SSD drive. So for example, if you're doing a shoot, if you don't have a laptop to copy the files over to your client, you can grab their SSD drive and copy it straight from your camera to their drive. It's a very, very useful feature to get your backups done while you're still on the road. Folder and file settings, this is where you can rename your folder structure. We keep going down to power save management. This is what I have set it to, 5 minutes for sleep mode and auto monitor off after 2 minutes. If I'm on a bigger shoot, sometimes I extend these times so the camera doesn't just shut off automatically. Thermal management, I think you just shoot straight away, set it to high, that way you don't have to worry about any overheating issues. Monitor frame rate comes standard at 60, I set it down to 30 first of all for power saving, and second of all, because 60 just looks too smooth on that monitor, and this doesn't really translate to how my final video will look like, so I always bring it down to 30, that way it's the closest to the final 25 output that I'm going to be doing. For the live viewfinder, I don't often use it, but if I do, I just want to have the smoothest experience, so I set that to 120 frames. Monitor settings, I always find that Lumix monitors are pretty accurate, so I never really had to change any of these settings, but monitor backlight, I always change it to +3 because no matter what, I'm going to go outside most of the time, and most of the time it's going to be too dim if it's set to 0 or to auto. So +3 is the way I go. I'm not really recommending to leave it on auto because the way that auto works is that it's taking the image that's in front of the lens, like your literal image. So if you're filming something dark, the entire monitor is going to be even darker. If you're filming something bright, it's going to become brighter. But if you're using like a really long lens, and your monitor just turns dark because you're filming something into the forest, but you're in the middle of a really bright day, it doesn't really work out, really. So I set it to +3. Yes, the battery might suffer a little bit, but I find that turning it to +3 is definitely worth it just so I can see my shots and what I'm filming. Moving down to beeps, that's my favorite setting, that's for sure. I usually turn all of these off. The only exception was the Lumix S9 because it doesn't have a physical shutter. So I set my shutter tones to a camera click, so I'm more satisfied. But with the Lumix S1 II, I just turn all of the settings off. Headphone volume is set to 10. If you're doing live streaming, we have Wi-Fi and streaming settings here, so you can set up if you're doing a USB tether or Wi-Fi and what kind of quality and frame rates, resolutions, all that stuff can be set up in here, including the streaming address. Down here we have Bluetooth, and you'll be using this function quite a lot, I think, with this camera. Lumix has also added a new function with the S1 II, where you can select if you want to connect to your smartphone, which is the Lumix Lab app and also the other Lumix Flow app. But also we have timecode via Bluetooth, so you can sync audio. And I think the most exciting with this camera is the gimbal Bluetooth connection function. And unfortunately, at the time of recording this video, this option is still not available. I think DJI has to come up with an update that supports the Lumix S1 II, but it's great to see that it's already in here, and we're going to see that hopefully very soon. Now, just a little upgrade about the version 1.1 firmware. Yes, the gimbal support now works, but unfortunately, this is only for the RS4 Mini, which doesn't really make much sense. The S1 II is a decently sized camera. You want to pair it with nice big lenses. The RS4 Mini is quite a small gimbal, so I really wish this was done for the RS4 and RS4 Pro, which really can support the weight of this camera and you can use it on bigger setups, but unfortunately for version 1.1 firmware, the support for those gimbals is not available. Hopefully we can see that in the next firmware upgrade. Going down, you have pairings. You can pair this with your Lumix Lab app. And the things I also like is auto transfer feature, especially on my Lumix S9. I can be taking photos with that camera and it's automatically transferring all the photos to my phone, just to my app gallery. And location logging is also pretty cool if you're doing like a location recce and you want to have specific coordinates set from your phone. Frame.io is also a super cool function. This is the integrated function where the camera can be connected to the internet via Wi-Fi or a hotspot, and it's just uploading proxy files or the images that you've been taking just real time. So as you're taking videos, as you're filming or capturing photos out there, your editor can be slowly downloading the footage and starting the edit as you're filming. Pretty cool to have Frame.io built into the camera. Great for those run and gun productions. And USB has a few USB settings. Probably the main one that's cool is webcam image quality. So you can basically plug in the Lumix S1 II into your computer, use it as your Zoom webcam and make your shots super cinematic. The only funny thing is 4K 12.5 frames per second. I don't know who's going to use that, but yeah, you've got Full HD 50 frames and Full HD 25, so stick to those ones. Don't do 12.5. Now, HDMI connection gives you a few extra HDMI settings, and sometimes some monitors have been struggling with playing back footage in 4K, so output resolution for playback. So this is something you might want to change on your playback screen if it's not really playing back the footage correctly. If it's glitching out on certain monitors, this is the setting you might want to change, output resolution for playback. Now moving down, we have save to custom mode for video. So this is the C1 to C5 functions, which you'll find on the top dial of this camera. So the easiest way to customize your C1 to C5 modes is go to the manual mode and set it up exactly how you would want the C1 to be customized as. So let's say I want my C1 to be 4K at 100 frames per second. Then I just go to save to custom mode C1, and override camera settings, yes. So now if I change to my C1 custom mode, that pulls up my 4K 100 frames, exactly how I set it up in my manual mode. And then you go through back to manual mode and you can set up your C2, C3, C4. So what I have done in my settings is I have preset all these custom modes to different, most useful camera resolutions. So the way I set up my custom modes is my manual mode is usually the one I use most often. So it's usually 6K open gate at 25 frames. But if I switch to C1, this is where I have my super slow-mo 100 frames per second. My C2 is 5.9K 25 frames per second, C3 is 5.9K in 50 frames per second, and C4 and C5 gives me 5.1K open gate in 25 and in 50 frames per second. So I have a mixture up there of 16:9 high resolution modes, 3:2 open gate high resolution modes with high frame rates, and also 100 frames per second in 4K. So that's just the ones that I usually would need to access really quickly, especially the 4K 100 frames per second mode. You can also set a bunch of other settings as defaults to the C1, C2, C3. So let's say every time I turn on my C4 or C5 open gate 5.1K resolutions, they always come up with a vertical 9:16 frame marker, which is used for social media cropping. Or I can set them up as my anamorphic modes. So as soon as I switch to C4 or C5, they'll be already de-squeezed at 1.5 times squeeze, for example. So what I find cool about Lumix is how many customizations and options you have to make this camera really fit within your workflow and make it work for you, not against you. Now with custom modes, there's one setting that we need to adjust, and that is custom mode settings. Go down to how to reload custom modes and the change recording mode where you want to set that to on. So sometimes what might happen is if you're readjusting the custom dial and then you change from video to photo mode, it doesn't fully reload the settings and it ends up kind of messing up in the background. So what we're going to do is change the recording mode. So every time you go from photo to video, it resets the settings and it makes it all work how it should. Save and restore camera settings. This is where you can load up my settings into your camera and be basically set up within a few minutes. Put it on your SD card, go into load, select the file settings, and you'll be ready to go. Going down, we have clock settings, system frequency. This is something you want to adjust depending where you are located in the world. Pixel refresh is good to do every once in a while. If you have a stuck pixel, this will get rid of it. And for me, one of the most exciting settings about the S1 II and S1 R2 is actually the shutter behavior at power off. It can actually close when you power off the camera, and that just stops just random particles and dust from getting onto your sensor. And when you're changing lenses out in the wild, you just want to sort of protect your sensor so no little dust particles gonna get on the sensor while you're like in the middle of a shoot. So it just gives you a little bit of a protection for your sensor. So every time I switch a lens, I turn off the camera, shutter closes. So I set that to close as soon as I got this camera. Sensor cleaning, also good to do once in a while. It just shakes the sensor and gets rid of any dust. All right, so we're basically almost done with the video part of the settings. We're gonna dive into photography very soon, but just before we do so, I'm gonna run you through what I have set up in my favorite settings for this camera, because you can set up to 3 pages of the settings that you don't want to dig through all the deep menus that we just went to. It's all the settings that you might wanna pull up really quickly. So going into page 1, we have IBIS, record quality, Vlog view assist. This is where I can change my LUTs really quickly. Dynamic range boost, frame markers. You can adjust all the settings of what markers you want. File format, focus peaking. We have photo styles, autofocus, custom settings, anamorphic D-squeeze, zebras, double card slot function. Some of the HDMI record settings, sometimes I want to see them on my external monitor, sometimes I don't, so this is just a quick way of pulling them up. The monitor backlight, framing outline, Bluetooth. If you want to pair a new device, you need the Bluetooth settings to be accessed really quickly. I just always know that they're in here in my favorite menu. Shear overlay, we have synchro scan, vertical position info. It's just those settings that they're real deep in the menu, but you don't want to go through that menu so often. And it's vertical positioning, usually that stays on, but then I need to shoot on anamorphic lenses and I need to turn it off. So this is kind of how I quickly find them rather than digging through those menus. Card format, frame IO. The last 2 settings, the reason why they're here and the reason why they're side by side is because you need to turn on the USB SSD function first, which is in a completely different menu. And then you have to go into the playback menu to select copy. And this just allows me to do it from the same menu screen a lot quicker, a lot faster. So this is just specifically for copying the files from your memory card to an external SSD. So you need to turn on the SSD, then select the files you want to copy and copy it over. So this is why those 2 settings are here, and this is new with the Lumix S1 II. Okay, so I've just switched my left dial to the photography mode. So let's dive into all the photography settings. First of all, let's go into the menu, go into operations and function button set. We are gonna run over all the photography function buttons and how I have set them up. White balance and ISO is set to default, but my exposure compensation is still set to zebras, so same as in my video mode. Now, when I trigger on zebras in photo mode, they don't really do much. They don't have a real purpose because zebras at 80% is set specifically for Vlog, showing overexposure at Vlog. It doesn't really show you overexposure in the different modes. It's gonna be different for standard, different for neutral. So the reason why I have the button set to zebras is so I just can turn them off. So if I had them on in my video mode and I switch to photos real quick, I just wanna have an access to turn off my zebras and I'll judge my exposure based on the screen or based on a histogram. The 2 most interesting custom buttons that I have programmed for photography specifically are the red record buttons again. Of course, in photo mode, we're not going to be doing any video recording, so my top red record button actually triggers Leica monochrome mode. I think this is such a cool feature where you can just hit one button and it goes to Leica monochrome. I can take some black and white photos, and then if I'm bored of it, I just press that button again and I'm back to my color profile that I was using just before. And my front red record button opens up all the photo styles. It is sort of similar to how you had the LUT button on the Lumix S9. This is basically my LUT button on the Lumix S1 II, except I have a lot more options. For example, we can go down, we can customize the highlights, shadows, all that stuff. We can add some grain, turn off color noise, and keep going down, and we can even stack LUTs. So I'm gonna choose Teal Flat S to be my LUT here. I can adjust the opacity. I can stack another LUT on top as well if I want to. I can make a really, really contrasty look. So this is how it looks like. Okay, cool. I'm gonna turn this down to maybe 80%. And if I'm happy with that look, I can just press on the display button and save this as a current preset, my photo style 6. And if you remember, you can actually add more of those photo styles in the menu up to 10. So this gives you so much flexibility in terms of taking photos with different styles and quickly switching in between those. Now, another cool thing is that LUTs were designed for specific picture profiles, but you don't have to stick to them. In real-time LUT function, you do have to stick to the designed picture profile LUT. So for example, one LUT might be made for Cine Like D, another one for standard picture profile, and they have to stay with that picture profile. With the My Photo Styles option, you can actually select a different picture profile. You can load your standard LUTs onto Vlog LUTs. It might look cool, might look crap. So it just gives you so much options. A cool thing that you might notice that Lumix has added if you were shooting on the S5 II, S5 IIX, or S9 is the grain little icon actually pops up now. Okay, so let's continue with the function buttons. Going down, most of them are set to default, except for function button number 1. This one is also set to trigger peaking on and off, because if I am shooting with some manual lenses, some M mount lenses adapted to this, then I'm just using manual focus. So I want to have peaking really easily accessible. So that is on the same button as in video mode. Function button 2 is set to autofocus point scope. So when you hold it down, it's going to zoom in into this little square and allow you to get the focus from that specific point in the center of the screen. And as you can see, my front red record button is triggering my photo styles, but you can also set it up to just trigger one specific photo style if you want that instead. I'm going to scroll past the digital function buttons into the function button 8 and 10. They both serve the zoom function. So when we are in crop zoom mode on a manual lens or crop zoom mode on a prime lens, I can use the top and down button to zoom in and out. And function button 9 allows me to adjust my aspect ratio really quickly. So I can go to my favorite 65:24 aspect ratio, and this gives me a really nice look. And keep in mind, the 65:24 applies only to JPEGs, but RAW files are still full 3:2. So you can still retrieve information even though you're shooting in an aspect ratio that has a crop on it. But I just love shooting in all these aspect ratios, especially 65:24, and I got so many cool photos. So this is a thing I always like to change really quickly. So that's why I have that programmed under my thumb. And on the left side, if we press the left button, this turns on silent mode. Once we're in silent mode, the shutter doesn't go. We only have electronic shutter, and this is just a quick and easy way to access this because sometimes you're in a quiet situation, you don't want to make any noise. So this is where you access it nice and easy and quickly. So that is it for the function buttons in photo mode. Let's now go into the quick menu settings and go down to item customize in photo mode. So opening up the quick menu, as you can see, I love changing my aspect ratio. That's why there's another way of changing it right in here. We have the photo grid lines, which I can turn on. I use this quite a lot for photography, where you want to line up a shot with the rule of thirds. Next, we have level gauge. We have photo styles, so we can change them from here as well. Focus peaking sensitivity, if I'm using manual lenses, this is a very handy feature. Crop zoom, if I turn this one on, I can use the up and down buttons to zoom in and zoom out. If I have a really long lens and I want to get a little bit of extra reach, this is how I achieve that. Going down, we have noise reduction. Sometimes I want to increase or decrease this. Next up is grain. I really like to use grain, especially in the low settings. I find that standard and high is just too much, but low or off is usually what I prefer. Sometimes when you're changing through picture profile styles, like if you're putting a LUT into real-time LUTs function, it will switch off the grain. So then you have to manually switch it back on. But then if you switch it back on, it turns color noise on as well. So that's why I have color noise right next to it, so I can switch off color noise because I prefer more black and white noise for my images. Down here we have image stabilization. Now there's one difference with image stabilization for photography, and that's the mode in the middle, which is panning auto. I use the panning auto mode in a few specific shots. So for example, getting a motion shot of a car driving by with low shutter, and I track it, take a photo, and the panning mode just works better than the traditional normal IBIS. Next up, we have histogram, which is what I sometimes use to judge the exposure. And we also have a quick access to our silent mode. So that is it for the quick menu buttons and function buttons. Before we dive into the photography settings, let's have a look at my custom modes. So this is C1 all the way up to C5 on the top dial. C5 custom mode actually has C5 1, 2, and 3 versions of it. So when you go into C5 on your custom dial, you can digitally choose which version of C5 you want. So that gives you a few extra customizations there. I personally just use the physical C1 to C5. The way I have customized my mode dial is in a very similar way to a Fuji camera. Latest Fuji cameras can change their aspect ratio just with a dial. So this is what I have done as well. My C1 to C5 custom modes actually just change the aspect ratio, which is super cool. I can quickly flick into C1, which is the 65:24 mode. I can go to C2, C3, and just change my aspect ratio depending on what I prefer to shoot. Now remember, when you're saving custom modes, you're actually saving every single setting that is in the current mode. So if we flick to manual mode and I'm going to save this current setting, it's going to save with grain on function. It's going to save the current white balance. It's going to save the photo, JPEG, and RAW, and basically every single setting that's on this camera. So for C1, C2, C3, up to C5, I have actually set everything to be in the standard picture profile. Let's say we're in C1 and I want to change my picture profile. I'm going to trigger my picture profile settings, go to my photo styles 2. I want this slot, and then I'm going to go to menu, go out into the save custom mode photo, press on C1, save. Now every time I come back to C1, it is going to be set to the same picture profile. So even if I turn off the camera, change my mode, the C2 is still at standard, but C1 is set with the LUT. So there's plenty and plenty of customizations you can do. You can set C1 to be a certain LUT with certain aspect ratio, C2 have a different LUT and a different white balance and different aspect ratio. So it's fully customizable to the way you want to set up your camera. Let's now dive deep into the photography menu. So the main photography menu, the first thing is photo styles. We already been through this menu. This is the same one as pressing the front red record button. Next, we have the metering mode, so how the exposure is getting metered when you're using automatic mode. If you press the display button, this will give you an overall explanation of how each of these modes work. Moving down, we have aspect ratio. Down here, we have recording file format. I usually recommend shooting RAW and JPEG. We can also switch JPEGs to the HEIF format. It does 10-bit instead of 8-bit, which is really nice, but it's not as widely supported as the JPEG format. You can also choose the picture quality, fine or standard, as well as HDR or SDR. I usually just stick with JPEGs and fine. Picture size, you want to use large to use the entire 24 megapixels. Moving down, we have the high resolution mode settings. So the camera sensor is 24 megapixels, but we can actually capture up to 96 megapixels photo size. And because Lumix sensor stabilization is so good, you can actually turn on handheld high res mode, and this will give the image sensor the ability to stabilize the image and still get those high resolution shots. And going down, I would definitely recommend a bit of a shutter delay, because if you press the shutter, it will shake the camera a little bit. But what I usually do is I press the shutter, hold my breath, and let the camera take the photo. That way you have a lot more of a stable image. And the way you take a high-res photo is you switch the mode dial here into the fourth option, which is high-res mode. Up here, you'll also find burst modes, timer, as well as time-lapse mode. All these settings down here will stay as default. And we're going to scroll down to autofocus settings. Now, most of these settings are basically the same as we went through in the video section. You can select your subjects, human, animal, car, all the same things, and just the same as before, you can select all the different modes. So for example, if we go into the train mode, you can select which part of the train you want to target with the autofocus. The same thing applies with motorcycles, cars. You can select the helmet or the entire bike. So that's a cool little trick if you're taking photos of motorbikes and things like that. I'm just going to set it to face, eye, and body. But if you're wondering what this one is, this is urban sports. So when the body is in different sort of positions, this is the mode you want to use. This is something new that Lumix has just added to their latest cameras. Now, autofocus custom settings for photo. To select this, we want to switch into the continuous autofocus setting on that autofocus dial here. And then here we have 4 different presets, and you can choose whichever one works for your situation. I am currently using set 3. Moving down, we have focus limiter. You can set your limits of where you want the autofocus to be working in. Autofocus assist light, I don't really like it, so we're going to turn that off. Focus peaking, it works the same as in video, so we can turn it on and set the color as well as the intensity. So for older lenses, vintage glass, you're gonna turn up your focus sensitivity because of softer glass. But if you're using some sharper lenses like the Lumix lenses, you can put this around 0. Focus frame moving speed, same thing. How fast is that focus box moving around the screen? Fast is usually the way to go. Flashes, now I haven't really used much of flashes. The only one I've been using is the Viltrox little vintage flash, but that one is a fully manual flash, so you just pop it on and you manually set it with manual settings, so it's pretty easy. I haven't really played around with any TTL flashes, so we're just gonna skip this section for now. Next setting is bracketing, and this allows you to bracketing for focus, for exposure. What this is good for is, for example, macro photography. If you're taking photos of little objects and you set your lens to f10, but above f10, it might get too soft. You can do focus bracketing. So basically take focus at different points and then run it for a program on your computer that will stitch all the focus points together and have a deeper depth of field. In version 1.1 firmware, we now have focus stacking. Focus stacking works in a very similar way to focus bracketing. The main difference being is focus stacking combines all the images together and outputs a final JPEG image inside of your camera. So you don't have to process all these photos through external software on your computer. You can process the photos straight on the camera. If you choose to capture your photo with focus stacking, you will get the final JPEG image as well as all the RAW files, so you can still process them on your computer. Silent mode is self-explanatory. It just silences the shutter, so I use that once in a while if I'm in a quiet environment. Hybrid zoom and crop zoom, very similar as in video. So when you're zooming the lens, hybrid zoom will zoom together and slowly add a digital crop as you're zooming through the range. Crop zoom, you just control it with the up and down function buttons. In photo mode, we can actually adjust what kind of quality settings, what final quality output we want to achieve with the images. There is an option of 12 megapixels at medium, 6 megapixels, and 2.5. Obviously, 2.5 is a little bit small, but this is how you can get a crazy range out of this lens. So usually it's a 24 to 60, and now it is a 24 to 187. So imagine what happens if you're using it with a 28 to 200 lens. The 200 becomes like 600 millimeters, which is really cool. If you don't really care too much about the photo quality, but you just want that zoom range, this is the way you can achieve it. But what I would recommend is small every once in a while, but mostly the medium settings with 12 megapixels is usually really good picture quality still, but you get that extra little bit of reach. So the 60 becomes an 84. And crop zoom, same thing as we can access from our quick menu. It just allows us to zoom in and out with our function buttons. Image stabilization, now one thing that's different here than in photo mode, it just asks us when we want to activate it. So if you don't want to use too much battery on image stabilization, we can activate it at half shutter press. So once you half press the shutter, image stabilization will activate and the image will become smooth. But when you're not pressing the shutter, the image stabilization is staying off. Good way to save a little bit of battery. Down here we have burst shot settings, and this camera can shoot some pretty fast burst photos. So if we go to super high speed, we can capture 70 frames per second. And then we can even do it with a pre-burst. So this camera can do pre-burst of 0.5, 1 second, or even 1.5 seconds. So it's constantly shooting photos in the electronic shutter mode. And then as soon as you press the shutter, the previous 1.5 seconds have been already captured. So there's no way you can miss a moment. Let's say there's a dolphin that's gonna jump out of the water. You had it framed perfectly, but you might have pressed the shutter a little bit too late. Well, this is going to save you from missing the shot, basically. So burst 1 and 2 is going to correspond to 1 and 2 on the top dial options. In behavior settings, you can set an image priority, which is 14 bits, or if you want speed priority, then you'll set it to 12 bit. Shutter type, I will usually leave that to mechanical and just change the silent mode to on if I want to go to electronic. Here you can delay your shutter by a few seconds, and down here you have time-lapse mode. And this is really in-depth. It's probably one of the nicest time-lapse modes on camera. It converts your photos into a video in camera as well, which is super nice. And you can do stop motion animation or time-lapse. And down here we can select the shooting interval and the image count. So let's say we want to do a 4-second time-lapse, 25 frames per second. We're going to shoot 100 images, and let's say we want to shoot them every 30 seconds. And this is going to calculate the time of when this time-lapse is going to finish capturing. The next thing is live view composite, which is sort of like overlaying the motion blur of an image as you're capturing it. So you can preview it as it's capturing, which is really cool. So as you can see, I'm gonna like put my hand and create these like motion streaks. I don't know, I find it's just like, it's really cool as it updates as you're, as you're doing it. Obviously this is not an amazing example, but as you can see what kind of things you can achieve with this. And we're just gonna press the shutter button, finish capturing it. If you go to preview it, here you can see it's quite an interesting image. Like it just overlays the exposure highlights onto the one image. So pretty cool, pretty creative way of capturing photos from a tripod. And moving down, you have self-timers. You can set it to 10 seconds, 10 seconds and 3 photos, or 2 seconds. It just gives you multiple options. All right, so that would be it. I think that covers everything, all the settings and all the customizations that I've put into this camera. Hopefully this video will help you to set up your Lumix S1 II. I'm looking forward to seeing what you make with it. And if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe down below, check out my custom settings, my LUTs, and I'll see you guys next time.